Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season 3 of Design Together, a podcast exploring how designers work together. I am your host, Abby Ryan Guido, a designer and educator working in Philadelphia, collaborating everywhere. Today, we'll be chatting with the folks from the Adobe Creative Jams team, Rachel Elnar, Elysia Syriac, and David Carr-Berry. For those unfamiliar with Creative Jams, they are an event where participants are inspired by a presenting speaker, they get trained on a software product from an expert, then they complete a challenge at hand. Teams create solutions and then present their work to a jury of industry experts and peers for a chance to win prizes and bragging rights. Rachel, I would love to jump right in. You've done so many of these jams, and I know you have a lot of thoughts and, behind them. I want to hear in your own words, what is a creative jam?
The Creative Jam is quite a few things. It's at its core, it's really a competition where teams of people, designers or students get together and they work on a project and then they share their project. That is at the core. So all the other things surrounding that change. The number of judges, who the partners are, how the feedback is given, but basically it's a fun event where everyone works together and then gets prized for their work.
Would you say it's like a design sprint for students?
It is like a design sprint, but not all the challenges are design-based. Some of them are about presentation and story. Some of them will be about telling stories through video. So yes and no. It is a hackathon of sorts, but you don't need to have design skills in order to participate.
So what kind of students participate? And would you say it's only for students?
The educational-based ones, yes, are only for students, either undergrad or graduate. Sometimes it's both. And the jams that we run, we do like to focus on the educational space. We do love to work with as many students and faculty as possible.
So what is your role on the Creative Jam team?
I'm mostly the program manager. I'm the one who does most of the hosting. I take care of the schedule. I just make sure that things on the back end are working well and integrated with Adobe. Make sure that we have the legal okay to do the prizing, that we have the budget for the prizing and whatnot.
And Elysia, do you want to jump in and share a little about what your role on the team is?
My role is program support. I guess it's a lot of back-end logistics, making sure that the flow for a student from registration to finale is dealt with and considered, and all the touch points are very well managed so that they have a good experience and know exactly what is needed of them from the moment that they register through working on the project to submitting their project, and then ultimately, if they arrive at the finale, that they are best suited to present their work at that event.
And David, would you mind jumping in and sharing the same type of information?
Sure, yeah. I'm the head of production, so I'm responsible for figuring out and organizing and prioritizing all of the physical production pieces, whether it's remote studios or the setups that help us communicate with each other, or a lot of the protocols for communication, and essentially quality control for the production to make sure that it's as high a quality as possible, and that it is that's not the bottleneck. I'm always making sure that the production gives a margin for the content to really shine.
And I know from being a viewer on my end, I've seen the jams kind of grow and evolve, and I'm saying improve not because they weren't always great, but the production value definitely has continued to increase and increase. And I think to kind of talk a little bit about that, what would be really nice, Rachel, maybe you could do this, is can you walk us through, let's focus on a design jam. Can you walk us through a typical educational design jam?
Yeah, typical educational design jam focuses on the partner. So right now we have partners like Netflix, Activision, HBO, Nickelodeon, and the partner will come in and give the topic. So for example, maybe the theme is around developing an app for children to stay connected during the pandemic. That would be Nickelodeon. They would bring a speaker who is part of their team. They would bring 2 judges. And how we would begin is that speaker would give an inspirational talk, presentation, talk a little bit about what it's like to work at Nickelodeon. behind the scenes, what are the challenges, who are their target markets, and also how well they work together, sort of like this podcast. Then we will unveil the challenge. Again, that is very related to the partner themselves or the design team. And the design challenge has to do with creating either a mobile app or some sort of experience that would solve a problem that Nickelodeon is putting forth. We would give everybody who is watching a little bit of software background, just enough for them to develop their project. Then the students would go off for a week, turn their project in. We have judges that would narrow down hundreds of entries into 10. And then those 10 finalists will come back a week later and present their projects to 3 judges, an Adobe judge and 2 of the partner judges. They give feedback, they score, and we find out who are our winners.
So are the projects ever projects that the companies are also working on in-house, or are these all invented for the jam?
They are invented for the jam. They're not spec work at all. We're not asking students to do the work of the design teams. They're typically also not work for the partner. So it's not a Nickelodeon app or anything like that. We are asking the students to take a look at the partner's target market to see their challenges and how they would solve a problem that would be related to or adjacent to, and not exactly the same things that they do in-house.
So what are the benefits for the companies that are coming in and partnering with Adobe for these creative jams?
The companies really love to see what the students are doing, how they are solving problems, how they are working through processes. They also like to have a closer touch point. I mean, a lot of times when you're working in-house, you're working with your peers every day. It's really great to see some fresh talent and to talk to them and see what their challenges are.
Elysia, did you have something to add to?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. It's kind of a way for them to give back and showcase their work culture so that as students graduate, they're aware of the various opportunities that may not have come right away to them. They might think that Nickelodeon or Netflix would have been an okay place, but it might have felt too far out of reach. But by connecting with these brands, they're kind of closing that gap and developing some sort of idea around networking. Another feature of our jams that we're trying to add are these coaching sessions so that our industry partners get to work with students or just have simple conversations, because there's a large gap that happens. Like, you're a student, you don't really know what working in the real world is kind of like. And so by making these connections, we're starting to close those gaps and build their professional network so that after they graduate, they have some sort of sense of what's expected of them or somebody they can reach out to, so that eventually, ideally, we're better setting them up for a job and building their portfolio. So it's kind of all interconnected.
Well, there's a lot of benefits for the students, for sure. What the benefits are for the company, I think, again, like Elysia said, is mostly giving back and just closing that gap between them and students.
And I talked to a lot of, adjunct faculty members who are working full time and coming in to teach. And a lot of what I hear from them is just that they get inspired by seeing what the students are making. And it kind of brings energy back into their own work. And I'm wondering if you've ever heard any of that feedback, if that ever happens with any of your industry connections.
Oh, yeah. I think that they love to see new ideas. I don't think we've ever seen a team adopt any ideas. I know that they have talked to some of the students about possible internships. So it is closing that gap again between the jam and jobs for the students.
As for those students, something that I'd like to dive a little deeper in is benefits for the students, because I know one of the barriers, and I work with a lot of students, one of the barriers is, how do we do work outside of our curriculum? And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what you all think the benefits are, but also what do you hear from those students that participate? What are they walking away with after they do a jam?
I'd like Elysia to take this one because I'm talking a lot.
Sure. The results and the benefits of participating in a creative jam are numerous, I guess. Now, a lot of students come in to practice their UX and UI skills. They come in to practice their presentation skills. They come in because they want to do something to set themselves apart from their peers. And extracurricular projects, every student who has utilized this in their portfolios to get a job, it gives them a leg up. And that is the most beneficial item I think that we can offer. And you don't even have to win or be in to place at all to have this separate you, because it just shows a level of commitment and excitement about your career that by even just participating, you're elevating and you're learning so much. And students use this to interview for their internships and just overall just elevate their skill set. And we have a lot of business students and advertising students and people who aren't necessarily UX UI students who come in and have rounded out their stories and are able to present ideas in a new fashion because of the things that they're learning inside our Creative Jam.
And now, are all the jams team-based? Is it always two students working together?
We have, the jams are mostly team-based.
Why teams? What is the benefit of having the students sign up as a team?
Well, a bit of accountability. They keep each other going, and they're able to bounce ideas off of each other. It helps to take some of the load off of the shoulders when you are in the middle of finals and other work, to have a team and to work together. So, and the great thing about a lot of the Adobe products, not to make a big plug here, is that there's co-editing in XD. And so students can work remotely, especially in a pandemic, on the same project together. And there's no gaps for collaboration.
I have one thing to add on to that. By working in teams, it mimics a real world project as well, because when they go into the workforce, generally you're not working in a silo. You're going to be collaborating with another designer or researcher or whatnot. So this also kind of mimics, how do you guys work together to have a tight deadline that's kind of high expectations. Or challenges are not very easy. They require thought. And so by working together, you're each bringing your own skill set to the table and improving your project more so than you would be if you just did it by yourself.
Yeah, I'm sure that also comes to play when you're talking about them building their story that they get to tell, is that they have this experience now where they, it was more real life, where they are partnered with someone. And I'm sure that they encounter very different kind of bumps in the road working as a team as they would when they're working individually. So I imagine that some of that happens as well. So I know you've been doing this for a little while now, and I'm just curious a little bit about how the three of you working together, what's changed in jams over time?
Well, for sure, jams have changed over time. I'll just give you a little bit of background on the origin story of the jams. So Adobe created the Creative Jams back in about 2014 as sort of a community event to bring the community together and to have about 30 people get together and work on a project. It was all in person. And the event was about 3 hours at the time. And so when I was brought on to make it more efficient and to translate it to an online space. So this way we would open up the hands-on working to anybody from anywhere. They don't have to be in one place. It was really a huge carnival at the time. It was a lot of fun. Abby, I don't know if you went to any of the community ones, but there was like face painting and like photo booths and,
And these were aimed towards professionals. Was that right?
They were aimed towards professionals, but students could definitely participate.
Okay.
To some degree, because there was an open bar as well. And so students would come in and have a beer and watch all the fun. And then again, teams would develop their project. They would present to a large group of like 300, 400 people. And it was crazy madness. It was a bit much for Adobe because, there's only 30 people who are getting their hands on the software. And yet we were supporting like an event of 300, 400 people. So we brought this to a hybrid model. We cut all the carnival stuff. We decided to just bring it online. And David helped me build this platform and make it more scalable with, none of the fluff, but all of the real core elements that people wanted. Students really want to have that hands-on experience and to learn skills that will help them get jobs, and we're able to scale that portion.
Yeah, I can chime in as well. When I first joined, Rachel was running the online part on her own. And so she was hosting, running the platform, running the communications with the guests, pulling people up, trying to add music, figuring out technical support. She was doing everything. And so really I came on in a way to lift the technical load off of Rachel so that she could host and really focus on the content side and focus on the communication with the teams, with the special guests and the judges. And we still started really small. We were just going out of conference rooms that we could book ahead of time at the Adobe campus. And kind of slowly, as we got more, kind of proved the idea to Rachel's boss, to various people, we got more support and were able to get room in one of the studios at Adobe and start going out of there, which really helped us immediately upgrade our production quality, but also kind of the ability to take the project seriously, as opposed to just feeling like it was just a webinar, or not even a webinar, just a Zoom call. Which we're on right now, obviously. It's funny because it is essentially a web-based call, but my whole way of approaching it has always been to make it as much of a production as possible, as much of a high quality, just a broadcast, and kind of taking the best of broadcast practices and the best of a Zoom call that you can do, which is to say high quality video and audio, and the ability to call up guests instantaneously and have a synchronous communication, which is actually really hard to do. Like even today, it's still hard to have a live conversation with a high quality video and audio. There's all sorts of delays that are built into the process. And so I'm proud of the fact that we're able to do high quality video and also synchronous communication, which is really the backbone of what it is for me. And my background has come from first live theater, then kind of production, like film, video production, and then live style broadcast production, where you again want to have content that's working with a group of people that everyone is able to watch it at the same time and communicate and chat and like have an event feeling of it, which is this merging of the live theater with film and video production. And so, yeah, I think that really has been my focus, is saying how can we keep the production quality growing without sacrificing that live element, so that the students, the judges, the guests all feel the sense of immediacy that we're trying to create, and that doesn't get lost.
To piggyback on that, the next step was to take this and scale it. And how now that Rachel is hosting and managing the content, and she's really focused, and David's working really hard on the production, then how do you manage the audience, and how do you manage everybody behind the scenes, and how do you take 30 to 600 projects and flow those through a system where you can efficiently have 10 people at the finale and they feel appropriate? And so So
how do you do that?
Yeah. I spend more time in Excel than my designer self would like to admit. But honestly, I came from a background where I did a lot of community events and had large scale flows of artists getting through a system. And so I was able to take that experience and apply it to Creative Jams, where we can take these students and push them through. And there's a lot of management of data and Excel sorting and email flows and tracked systems. And we map out the touch points along the way, just like any design system would, okay, so you register, then what happens? And then what happens? And so we're looking at these user flows. To your point, I know you talk a lot about human-centered thinking, like that whole process is layered on top of this so that we are focusing on the best experience, not only for the students, but for the judges. We know that our partners are super, super busy, and taking on another project, that's a lot. So we really just want them to show up we handhold them and do the work and make sure that they can just be present and have fun and and bring their expertise to the event rather than worrying about like, what do I have to prep? What do I have to do? Just be yourself and have fun. And that's really important to our success because we don't want to put any extra effort on the people participating because it's already enough.
And then how do you evaluate what's working? Does the team have a system to go back? Do you gather feedback from any judges or folks in the industry or students? And then do you all come together and think about what can we do next to improve it the next time around?
Oh my gosh. I've never met a team that does a better job at this. And I have to
tell us a little bit about what it is you do then.
I want to start with David because I think he has really set the stage for it and we've followed. And I'll talk about, we do student surveys. We get a lot of feedback from them. We're constantly asking for feedback, but I definitely want to pass this over to David because he has, I think, demonstrated great leadership in this portion that we have all followed suit on. And I just want to say one more thing, and you can put this anywhere in the episode. Everyone's really good about feedback and constructive criticism on our team, and we are collectively looking to improve, and we all value that. And I think it's a really unique space where we can all come together and share our wins and losses and feel proud of those and constantly move forward. Okay. Now to David.
All right, David, it's on you.
Well, so I do agree with Elysia that, well, I feel that we do as a group believe in iteration and improvement over time. And that's something that I learned, I guess, in two ways. One, with theater and live broadcast before, there's a sense that every show can be better because the format is the same each show, but there's an opportunity each show to make it a little bit better. And there's also this huge benefit where you don't have to do drastic quantum changes each single show you do. You can do a little change, and over time, it's easy to see the progress. I'm also definitely a student of, I guess, military communication and the NASA tradition, specifically around the Apollo era, where they were figuring out how to do something really difficult with a big group of people and to improve one to the next. I mean, famously, you have Apollo. The one when we finally landed on the moon was Apollo 11, which means that they had, 11-ish. Before that, before they ever landed on the moon, and there was a whole process for staging one to the next, which is to say nothing of the previous missions before that. A big part of what NASA did and a big part of the military tradition is to have debriefings. So after you do something, you wait a little bit, an hour or a day, and you come back together. And so what we do is we'll typically do a show and we'll take an hour break or a 90-minute break. We come back and we just go through the show. How did it work starting back at, how far back do we want to go? Generally, I focus on the production phase. So that would be, okay, how are the tech checks? How were the trainings? How were the initial kind of T-5 from the production? And then where we really focus is the actual show. How was that pre-flight? Oh, remember when this thing happened? What was that? Elysia, what was your comment? Or Nate, what was your comment on that? Whoever was kind of focused on that, either positive or negative thing that may have happened that either was unusual or basically not normal. Those are the things we focus on. This was not normal. Why was that? Is there a way, what can we learn from that for the next show? Because the idea is always, for me anyway, it's never about, oh, you shouldn't have done that. It's always about, how can we use this experience and apply it to the immediate next show and the next shows after that? So we're constantly building this evolving standard operating procedure that is not a fixed thing from the past, but is always this living document that's kind of being created as we go. And so it remains dynamic. And there's this really nice idea that I got from Robert Pirsig, who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. This idea that you can have a ratcheting system for quality. So, and a ratcheting, by that, I mean, when you go one way, it's free, but it's not free to go back. So that as things get better, there's a ratchet to stop it from backsliding. And so by talking about it and keeping the SOP alive, you keep the quality going forward and you make a system so it can't go back by accident. And so that way, the show can continue to get better and better and better over time.
Is there actually a living document? Like, is there a place where you kind of track all of this and you can kind of reflect back and see where you were a year ago and kind of read what you talked about? Because you all produced a lot of these. I'm always very impressed every time I see another one coming. It's probably sometimes hard to kind of stay on top of everything that was discussed. So how do you actually manage all of that?
Well, that is a challenge, actually. And we've brought in a new person recently, a producer named Heather, who's going to be helping us to essentially manage and track those changes and kind of help keep us accountable. The way we do it primarily is the fact that we have this luxury of high frequency. We do the show a lot, so we kind of are able to keep it on our mind. When we do a different type of show, like we have a show called The Perfect Match that we're working on, which is a much bigger challenge because it's only once a month. And that means that during that month, or if, like when we were just starting the show, because it's still in its infancy, really, you might have 2 months between shows. And during that time, the headspace of all the things we improve can start slipping, and that ratchet starts to fail and starts to slip back. And then we get back to this show and we're like, wait a minute, we're making the same mistakes. Oops. What I do for myself is I have notes that I always go back to that are dated for the show. So I can see what we did, what things we intended to move forward with. And so I'll always go back to those. Like, for example, we had a kickoff for this month's TPM show. And for me, I'll always go to those notes and look at what we talked about, essentially minutes, and with certain things are called out as decisions that I know that we decided to move forward on. Okay, this is an improvement. We're changing the sound effect for that section. This is an improvement. We're going to use for placement only text when we practice the gameplay of this section so that a designer won't accidentally see the text or whatever it is. There are these little tiny, tiny details. And the tracking of all those details actually does take a lot of headspace and a lot of maintenance. And right now, it's a little bit, we're still running a little bit on luck, I have to admit, which is a big reason. And part of that is the capacity with the high frequency and everyone working hard. Part of the reason why we brought in another person is to help us essentially codify the documentation system. That's going to be one of her lanes, is to help us make sure that we keep recording this stuff. And it's not just on my notepad or not just on one individual's notepad or in our memory that might rust over 2 or 3 weeks, but exists.
Because I think it's just common for folks, whether designers, whatever you're creating, is that you feel like you're so in the moment. You think, I'm going to remember this because I feel it so much right now. Mm-hmm. And then you walk away and you do many other things and you get back to it and it's not there anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm very aware that a lot of these skills are, they can decay. So one of the things that I do as well for the team is I lead these simulations, which is another thing that I took from the NASA tradition, which is to say, we need to practice this, not in front of an audience, but for ourselves, so that the number one goal of a simulation essentially is to maintain proficiency. Can we do this? Or have we forgotten how to do this? Because a lot of these skills are very kind of, there's a word for it that I'm not getting, but it's like they decay. And so without proficiency and repetition, they decay. One of the things that astronauts did in the Apollo era is they gave them these jets to fly around. Like, oh, you have to go and do a press conference in Chicago? Take a jet. Oh, you have to go out to Los Angeles to check on the new rocket thing? Take a jet. And it seemed extravagant to some of the NASA people, but the astronauts convinced them it was necessary because flying a jet takes such skill and concentration. It maintained their proficiency as pilots, which was a critical part of their role in the NASA manned spaceflight program. They had to maintain proficiency and confidence in the skill of piloting these difficult craft. And for us, if we lose proficiency, we lose not only like the little skills, but also that kind of rapport and confidence to work well together. And that's a huge part of it for me, of like what we need to keep in order to perform well.
What I love hearing as you're sharing all this is just how dedicated you are all are to this program. I mean, it really shines through that this isn't just, you don't just wake up and jump on and this is your job. You have to just get it done. I mean, all the thought and behind the scenes care that's put into it, it shows when we're talking, but it also shows in the actual creative jams. Whenever I get to watch one, I'm always very impressed. And like I said, I've noticed how much they've continued to get better and better. Elysia, I wanted to jump back to you because you said something that really stood out to me, and it's because I've been reading Radical Candor. And I don't know if you've read it, but you talked about how you all are open to feedback from each other. And I know because I do know you personally. I've known Rachel for a long time, and I've gotten to know you, David, and you, Elysia, just through the jams. What is it about this relationship that makes it so that you feel safe giving each other that type of feedback?
I think it's because ultimately we're very aware it's not personal. And we do a lot of work to make sure that, and I think our team is sensitive to each other, and I think it's our own confidence in our own jobs too. Like, I do think that has a lot to do with it because I've been through, and we've all been through various job experiences, and we're not brand new in our careers. So we understand the process of that. And I do think ultimately we're here to do a really good job. We all want to do a really good job, and our values are aligned in that moment. And I think because we know it's about the show and we all respect and value each other individually, that's where it comes from. And I know, like, we're all different. I am a sensitive human being. I know that I am the emotional one. And that's a quality that's really helpful. And other people are not as emotional. And that's really important too. So I think it's the overall respect that we have for each other, the ultimate goal that we know that we're trying to make a really good product. And we all believe in that product. So I think all of our skill sets really come together, and we just value that. And I think because of that, and we know it's not personal, we're able to take that feedback and improve the show and put it to good use. And I've learned a ton from this team because of their different skill sets and their different experience. Checklists are so important to every single one of us now. And that is definitely because of David, and our high quality of excellence is showcased by Rachel. She's constantly pushing us to be better in our content, be better in our voice. And she moves us in that direction. And, I do my best to support the team in efficiencies and processes and try to add a human point of view because of just my own personal being.
Something as I've been reading the book and just thinking about having personal relationships in a work setting and why it's so important to then be able to give honest feedback. I keep thinking a lot about that, and David, you're going to relate to this coming from theater, but Rachel and Elysia from design, is that from a pretty young age, we all are very used to getting critical feedback. It is just part of what we do. And so I think, my brain goes to why are designers such great leaders? Because I think we are great leaders. And I've recently kind of come to that, I think, because we for a long time, and not that it's always been done in the right way, because I have a lot of issues with how critical designers are trained sometimes. And I think that has to evolve as well. But I do always think we're going to get that critical feedback. And that kind of sets us up for these positions in leadership where we've learned that what you said, like when it's personal, when it's not, and how to kind of build that, I don't want to say thick skin because we shouldn't have that, but just that separation in our minds that this feedback isn't about who I am. It might be about something I did, but that's not who I am. And I can always continue to grow. And I don't know if that resonates with you all as well. I've been thinking a lot about that myself.
Yeah, I love that. I think the one thing that strings everybody who's in this team together is the passion and love we have for the product, for the team. And because we know that we're all focused on making this product the best thing we can to make the experience the best for the students, so it allows them to get jobs or allows them to get forward in their career, make the experience fun for the partners so they will let others know and participate again. I think that is because that is our focus, that we take the attention off of ourselves and really work together to elevate all aspects of the show together.
I'm curious, this is a little tiny off topic, but I love talking to students about all the many ways their careers might go. And I'd imagine none of you being, early 20s in a classroom thought like, one day I'm going to run Adobe Creative Jams. Right. So, but I do see fulfillment in all of you, and I hear the passion for what it is. And so I'd love for each of you to talk a little bit about that and how this kind of is fitting into your own kind of creative expression and careers, whether it's about the leadership part. Heard about the connecting with students. I know, Rachel, that's always been a passion of yours, but I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about that from each of you.
Not only working with students and faculty are really important to me, and also working with designers. I think what I love, or how my background has contributed towards this, is not only being a designer, but also having acting and directing background, and working on podcasts like this, and doing my own production, which was Typography Dojo for 2 years, which is just me helping to work with AIGA chapters, doing type ed, going around and meeting many designers and helping them understand typography and how it communicates to business. And it's not just about picking fonts. So there's a lot of things that that this role holds, that this product holds, that is near and dear to me. And I feel like a lot of my background, management, leadership, design, really just attribute to this.
Yeah, I agree. David, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting thing making a living. And I think that it's like, that's the enigma to me, is like how one, especially as a student, translates their interests and passions into then making a living. And I think my reflection on it, having had lots of different jobs, and some of them in the field that I'm passionate about, and other ones just like labor jobs and jobs in restaurants and all sorts of stuff, is that there's this weird interface between, for me, my passion and what is useful to a company or to society at that moment. Like there's this weird Venn diagram of overlap. I'm passionate about NASA and about theater and working together with people. And I'm passionate about directing, and I'm passionate about beauty and aesthetics and making sure technology is serving artistic goals as opposed to just commercial goals or whatever. Like I have various passions, and some of those are able to overlap as being really useful to companies or to other individuals or to customers in general. And right now, a lot of those interests I have are really useful to Adobe and to these students who come and watch it, or these designers that come and watch it. And I get to invest in my passion for communication and aesthetics and technology and filmmaking, et cetera. And that gets to yield a benefit for others as well. So I feel like it's a very strange thing. But I will say that sometimes I've been very lucky that it's a great overlap and it's a win-win. And other times it's been very unlucky. And it's like, oh, my interest is totally useless to other people right now. And I guess I'll just have to wait around until the stars align, or I'll have to see if I can use one of my other abilities or one of my other skills to make a living until the stars align again and there's a better overlap. So it's a very interesting thing. I don't think there's anything simple about making a living with what you're interested in. And I also think it's impossible to predict exactly what form. For me, it would be impossible to predict exactly that I'd be part of this team, because there's no way for me as the individual to know exactly how my skills will be useful to a company or to an audience. I can't know that, but I can know what I care about, and I can continue to invest in that. And even when I'm not making a living at it, I can continue to invest in it. And then when I do start making a living at it, those skills will pour back into that thing. And it'll make me even more valuable to them. And hopefully it'll make the experience more valuable to me as well.
Right, which it's, hearing you say all of this, it's so hard when, I know a lot of my listeners are students and people in education, and they really want to be like, I am going to be blank. and we ask them at a very young age. I mean, I'm guilty of it. My 6-year-old is going to invent some robot unicorn that's going to make people live forever. I can't exactly figure out what it is yet, but we do it all the time. And hearing you talk about this in your background, it's not this clear path. I'm not going to become a doctor. That there are many ways, and it's important to learn different skills that will help kind of open your eyes to different opportunities, and also, like you said, have skills that are valuable to different types of teams, different companies, different people. But it is very hard, I think, when you're that age to think like that I'm not just learning this one thing, that I am then going to do this one type of job. I'm going to jump to you, Elysia, but I want to just dig into this a little bit. Are there fears that come along with this type of approach of like, maybe it's going to work and maybe it's not? Or do you have any words of advice to a student that feels like I have many interests, but I can't quite put my finger on what I want to do?
Yeah, I think that quite honestly, it's like part of that. It's part of the great unknown about just being alive. It's hard to pull punches about it because it is scary. Because yeah, maybe in the old days, or there is a fantasy that I think kids and even adults have, that like if you practice a skill, you can just have that job. But there are very few of those jobs anymore, and they certainly aren't design jobs, I don't think. I mean, maybe the doctor example is like if you study and you spend 25 years in school, you can be a doctor. But in terms of design and arts and humanities, it's a much more amorphous and unpredictable space. And by its definition, it's just more dynamic. I think the best advice that I could think of it would just be having faith in one's genuine interests. And having faith in my own interests, my own passions, and continuing to invest in them, even if they aren't making a living or making lucrative feedback at that moment, because there's just no promise that they will. However, those skills, the more high quality I can make those skills, there will be a moment, most likely, that someone will say, oh, wow, you've really got some skills in that. Here, let me give you some money to make a win-win here. So I do think that just investing in the skills personally is very important. And I actually do think that these jams is useful for that, because the students may or may not be able to be selling or trading their skills yet, but they certainly can continue to invest in them at any point. And the passion is such a better fuel than fear too. So to me anyway, so definitely leaning into the passion and the genuine interest. Like for me, staying up late reading books about NASA, that's my thing. And that's definitely for me to do. And then there may be a moment like with this team where I get to come in and say, hey, we should do a debriefing like this, because this is the way I've learned and I've seen it could really work. And then it really might have a benefit to the team.
And Elysia, Rachel wants to jump in. Go ahead.
My mom always said, just do what you love and money will come. And so I think that's really, the path that I've taken. And it sounds like David did that too.
I'll piggyback on that, but I don't know how I'm going to follow that. Because David talking, I was ready to cry. Just the passion and excitement behind that is, and you're more than your career, right? And so if you'd asked my 19-year-old self, where do you see yourself in 20 years or whatnot? I would have said making policy in the US government. I had the plan to be in the UN or work for a non-governmental organization. I was going to solve the world's problems. And what's interesting about that upon reflection is ultimately the nuggets of where I am now are seeded from that. I love bringing people together and bringing them to a goal. I learned that I'm not like the idea person in the room, but I am the person who can take your idea and bring it to fruition. And I never realized that had value. I always thought I had to be the person jumping off, oh, here's this great idea. But that just wasn't me. It was a lot harder. And so I took everything that I learned from my jobs and also putting myself in positions that were uncomfortable and getting out of what my job was teaching me. So Rachel had mentioned AIGA, and I'm just going to second that, because that organization gave me a lot of skills and soft skills and a network and opportunities that I wasn't necessarily going to get through my day-to-day job, and opened me up to the skill set that I have now. And so I think always be learning, always be challenging yourself. I think one of the greatest things that I learned is from this team and other teams, just keep learning, keep trying new things, never close yourself off, because if you're boxing something out, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to grow and learn. And as humans, we are constantly changing. Change is the only thing that's inevitable. So let's find the best way to flow with that change and keep chasing what follows you. I feel like my career has been a zigzag and a sideways and a jump and a leap. And sometimes I'm backstroking, like just keeping yourself open to opportunities, because you'll never know when that phone call is going to come. I've had people from 5 years ago hit me up on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I'm in the area. I'm looking for this new thing. I thought you'd be great. I don't remember meeting you. But obviously I showcased that I'm who I am, I guess. And you just never know where these interactions are going to come through, where they're going to lead you. And I think that's the coolest part about having design anywhere in your background, or problem-solving skills anywhere in your background. You can apply that. And even if you come from like a history major or an anthropology major or business major, your skills are valuable in a team setting. And you can add value in so many different ways. So I think it's just that passion that everyone has kind of reflected on. Just follow it, and it will come. You just have to kind of trust the process a little bit. It's never easy, but it's always worth it.
I like too how you said, you've realized that you're the person who can take this idea and make it happen, and that maybe you're not always the best at coming up with the hundreds of ideas, but you can grab onto them. And I think what I take away from that is understanding that we can't all be everything, and that's important, and it's actually better, because then you can focus on the parts you enjoy doing and the parts you can do well, and we don't have to know every type of skill, and that I take that away from just the jams in general, because they are working together, and when students join together, they can have those conversations about what are they good at, what do they want to take on. And I'd love to hear from you before we go today, for students that will be signing up for a future jam, what type of advice would you give them?
I would advise that they use all their strongest skill sets. So communication is really important, especially remote. I think ideation, brainstorming, developing a path, time management, everything that they learn in the classroom that they can bring to the jams and be really successful.
I would say, to piggyback off that, use pencil and paper. Don't go to the computer first, because ideas flow really easily out of your hand than they do sometimes through a mouse. And ask what's different? What can we bring new to this? Because there's a lot of assumptions that come with design processes. So you get all those assumptions down, and then look at the challenge and what can we improve? What would be new and exciting for this event or for this challenge? And I think you could bring that to all of your design projects as well, as just like, what can we do now that we have all this XYZ, all the basics set up? What can bring it to that next level? And challenge yourself a little bit. Sometimes it's just a bright color palette. Sometimes it's a new feature. I think, add that pop once you have the basics of that user experience kind of flushed out. And that's the most important thing, because if you can't get from A to Z without Y, and you skip Y, then your whole thing's broken.
And my sense would be, I guess, two things. The first thing I thought of was identify with the user, like just be the user. And always go back to that. That'll automatically generate empathy, but it'll also kind of really help I imagine it like a little dollhouse, or like this little and you have to be the camera going through the dollhouse. If you're outside the dollhouse looking at it, it's easy to kind of get things a little bit out of perspective, or to think of it just like the master or the god looking down on the dollhouse. But that's never how the user is going to experience it. They're always going to be the little doll, and they're not going to feel like a doll. They're going to feel like a real person in a real house. So like keeping that proportion in mind, I think, is crucial. So what's the first room look like? How do they get to the next room? Is there a bathroom that they can get to easily? Where's the kitchen? But the other thing I would think of, and this is more from my filmmaking background, is choose the one or two really crucial moments of the experience that are special. that are like, oh, this is the reason we did this room, so that you spend most of your time on that room or that event, and let the other things kind of be more, if necessary, kind of more sketched in. And then if you have time to kind of fill them out, you might need every room, but really it's that, to me, it's those key set pieces that will help it stand out. And those will need the most time anyway, because they'll be the most unusual. They're not just a hallway. They're not just a front door. They're like this special room that only you and your team understand. So that's the one to really spend the time with. And maybe just choose one or two of those special moments to focus on, and let the rest be kind of more boilerplate if necessary.
So one thing I'd love to hear a little bit about is, how do you produce all of this? I know you do it all remotely. So how do you actually make it happen?
Yeah, I think that it's a very interesting thing. We started in person, but we've grown these jams to, we do over 20 jams a year with all these big partners. And we do it with every single team member totally remote. So all the systems that we have put in place are really important in order to make sure that everything goes on cue really well for the short 2 hours that we have everybody all remote. And I think it's all the systems that this team has put in place. Maybe we can, I think that David could probably talk a little more about some of the remote systems that we've put in place.
Sure. Yeah, there are a bunch of them. I think one of the crucial things has to do with Nate, who's a technical producer on our team. What he does crucially, and what is that he makes it possible to essentially operate a lot of queues and a lot of equipment remotely. Like, he's done a lot of the thinking and a lot of the engineering behind, essentially, he's, in one part of California, and Rachel is in another. And the broadcast center is essentially where Rachel is, or wherever the host is. But Rachel can't be operating any of those pieces. She can't operate sound effects. She can't operate transitions between different shots or different sources. She can't operate graphics or the keynote because it's just too much for the host. And Nate has figured out the way to operate them. And so essentially, there's a lot of remote work that he does, logging into multiple machines at Rachel's space in order to operate queues. And then if you go back from that difficult question, which you could go into too much detail with, the question is, how do we coordinate all those queues? And so that is this huge thing about having, essentially using Zoom or a proxy of that, whether it's BlueJeans or whatever, so that we're all communicating on the day of a show in a really lucid and immediate manner. We have redundant systems for communications. We use Zoom, and then we also use Slack so that we can text with each other as a backup. And then we also have essentially a cue sheet that is this like backbone of the entire show that gets developed as we lead up to the show. It's based on a simpler version, which is a run of show. And then this cue sheet literally has a number for every single cue, a number for checking that the production mixer is in the right state, a cue number for fading in to see the host for the first time, a cue number for unmuting the host's microphone. And there are hundreds and hundreds of cues on a given show. And essentially, by having a unique number for every single cue, I, as the technical director, because that's the role I serve during a given show, I'm literally going through the cue sheet and calling cues so that Nate can be operating and essentially executing cues remotely, and that anyone else on the team, whether it's Elysia or Eva, who might be doing communication with the chat moderating, or Heather or anyone else, can basically know where we are. And so that we have a kind of a spine that is locked and is readable by anyone, so that we know that when we're on Q200, this thing is going to happen. That becomes really important if we have to go out of the normal for a minute, if we have to change, like, oh, this one computer needs to be restarted in the middle of the show. Okay, so we're going to stop doing cues from this machine. We now have to do the cues from this other machine, the backup. And so in order to know how that backup is going to plug in, they need to know what queue they're on. We all have that information. Suddenly the backup, keynote deck can be pulled up at the right slide at the right moment because everyone knows what queue we're on. So it's really a question of developing a kind of a single spine that has all the information that we can all reference so that we always know where we are in time. And then once that computer has restarted, we can re-enter the production with the proper primary machine at the right cue, at the right time. And then basically never skip a beat. So the audience may not notice anything has happened, and we never get into a state of chaos, which would be very easy to do if we didn't have a single lane with all the cues kind of locked in with time.
Do you find that this system is more complex being done remotely in everyone's homes? Was it a lot different when you were all together in the Adobe studio?
It requires more discipline. It requires everything to be more exact. Like cue numbers were something that I had started when we were in person, essentially just because I thought it was a good idea and I could see it being useful at some point. And then once we went remote, it was like, oh.
So this is all your fault, David. Basically, you predicted what was about to happen with your cue numbers.
And once we went remote, the cue numbers were completely critical for me and Nate to be able to coordinate without being in the same room, for him to know exactly where I was and for me to know exactly where he was. Yeah, so it required that any best practices that were kind of theoretically a good idea suddenly became a necessity. And without them, the show couldn't operate at all.
Is there anything else to add to the kind of working remotely besides the actual technical side?
Yeah, I think Elysia can probably speak to the, hundreds of global students all over and trying to schedule them, making sure that they're getting on screen.
So there's so many endpoints and so much unique individuals and data and all of that we really rely on. It can just be a clear communication. And because everyone is also overloaded with messages and needs and emails, how can we make our communication as clear as possible and as direct as possible? Because nothing that we're asking anyone is very easy. Presenting in a finale. All right, well, what does that actually mean? And so there's a list of things that we have to give them at any given point, and we need to keep all those systems up to date and ready. And also text messaging. I cannot tell you how many text messages I have sent on this job, but in the moment when you're doing something, that's the best way to communicate with anyone, because it's either on their screen or right in front of them. And because we can't be in the same room to say, okay, 5 minutes, I'm going to escort you on stage. Nope, it's, hey, you're up next. Please say hi in the chat. And that simple message serves somebody up to David for David to bring them on screen. And it's actually a lot easier in some degree to do this job remotely because we all have so much going on that in the studio, we couldn't talk. We couldn't verbalize what was happening because we're all in the same space and we didn't have a sound booth. Now we have an open channel and we have all these different ways to communicate. That's actually way easier to do in our individual spaces than it was before. So interestingly enough, being remote has allowed us to kind of grow and expand our roles and our systems faster than it would have in our studio space because we just didn't have what was looking for.
Yeah, that was really interesting. That idea about when you're together, it would be really strange and probably viewed as what the hell is Elysia texting someone for? But if you pick up your phone in the studio and start texting to someone, that's just a funny thing that I heard. But I also, you mentioned you have Slack and you have these chats and texts, and I relate to that because I have that too for work. And somehow it seems like naturally we've all figured out what information gets communicated as to in what channel, without ever saying, when we want to say this, we say it here. And even though they're different windows and different systems, it still feels seamless. It still feels like we've only increased our ability to communicate with each other. And it seems like that happened for you all as well when you moved to this virtual world.
Yeah, I think overall we're trying to set a model, right? We have a team of 6 or so who are constantly working together for a specific goal. We do it all remotely. Setting the model for students that they can also work in teams, do everything, get it done on time, submit their projects, and it's doable and it's successful.
And I also would add in, it's fun and it's valuable, right? And I love that side of it. And I love that you all are modeling how to work together and how to produce such a high level show so often. And really, I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but with a pretty small team for what you all do, you do a lot of work for there only being 6 of you, and the quality of what you're producing. And I think it definitely shows in what I've seen.
Thank you, Abby. Appreciate it.
Of course. So for both industry folks who may want to be judges, but also for students who want to get involved, what should they do if they hear this and they say, that's me, I want to be a part of this?
Ooh, we have one email address that they can send us any notes or inquiries to. That's jams@adobe.com, and we will respond to that.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Rachel, David, and Elysia, for being here. I really loved our conversation, and I'm sure all the listeners will as well.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to send us a message or leave us a review. To learn more about the show, check out our website at designtogetherpod.com. Special thanks to Rob Weston at Great Magnet Recording Concerns for providing our post-production.